Hello, this is Ruth Brunner, and today is August 14th, 2023, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Gloria Gaslin at her home in Windsor. So, Gloria, could you tell us your full name, maiden name, name changes?
Okay, Gloria Jean Miller, and then it was Gloria Jean Gaslin, and then eventually it was Gloria Jean Shell, and then Gloria Jean Gaslin.
All right. And where was your place of birth, date of birth?
February 1st, 1936, at Bracewell. I was born at home, and it was a very cold winter. Mom had to keep me next to the oil heater in the front room because we didn't have furnaces, in the old country houses. But she forgot my feet because I got cold feet all year long.
So, did you have siblings?
I had a sister, Wilmina, who was 7 years older than me, and a brother, Marvin, who was 4 years older than me. So I was the baby of the family.
Okay. And when did your family come to this area of Bracewell, Colorado?
Well, I'm not sure when the folks moved into the farm at Bracewell. I think before that time they lived in Johnstown. But Dad started working for Mr. Mercer on that farm. He just worked for him. Eventually he was able to buy half of the farm, and then when Mr. Mercer decided to retire, he was able to buy the whole farm.
Oh, okay. So, do you know why your family came here? And
Well, just that Dad wanted to be a farmer, and so he was very fortunate to be able to eventually have his own farm.
okay. Did your extended family live around?
He had lots of brothers and sisters around here, and so did my mom. She was a Borgans, yeah. Now, let's see, I don't know that I said my folks' name.
Okay, yeah.
William A. Miller, the A was just an initial. He didn't have a name that it went to. And then my mother was Rose Borgans.
So let's talk a little bit about your childhood.
Okay.
What was the play that you used or did when you were a child?
Well, we had always cats and dogs, so I loved cats. But we were very fortunate. We had a playhouse that my grandpa Borgans built for us, so Wilmina and I played in there a lot. I made a lot of mud pies and decorated them with wildflowers.
Who ate them?
The birds.
So, who took care of the children in your family?
Well, Mom was a farmer's wife. She was just at home and helped, take care of the everyday things, did canning and all those type of things. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, Mom took care of us.
Okay. And so what kind of chores did you have or your mother and father have?
Well, my chores were, to feed the cats and dogs and stuff, chickens. At one time we had some sheep. But, and one of the things that I did too was in the summertime I got to herd the cows up and down the railroad tracks on the grass that grew
beside it.
So we probably had about between 4 and 6 cows, and so I would herd those up and down the railroad tracks. And the railroad ran through our yard, our farm.
Uh-huh.
We had a lane that went from the house south, and we had a lane that went from the house going north. And our house sat on the north side of the railroad tracks.
Okay, and was that the Great Western Railroad?
Yes.
Okay.
And I always liked to watch and try to wave to the conductor. And I always was waiting for somebody to be in the caboose, but I never ever saw anybody in the caboose.
So Bracewell had its own sugar beet dump. Is that what it was
Yes.
known for? And what year was it that?
Well, I'm not sure what year that was. We lived on that farm until I went into into junior high, probably about in I'm trying to think, probably 1943 or so. I don't remember. But sugar beet dump was there for quite some time.
Okay.
And they would load the sugar beets up and then take them in by rail car
Okay.
into the processing plant in Windsor.
The plant in Windsor that we know is kind of
Where-
on by the baseball field, and now
Yes.
the cemetery off of Walnut.
Right.
Okay. That's interesting. So, what was your favorite time of the year on the farm?
Oh, I guess just summertime, but like I say, did the cows, herding the cows and stuff, but we did have a winter that was bad. We had the blizzard of '49.
Okay, the blizzard of '49, and were
Yeah.
you still living out on the farm then?
Yes.
And what was that like?
The drift was as high as our shed roof. We could walk up on the shed roof and slide on down. It was huge. It was a big blizzard, yeah.
Could you
So-
get in and out of your house easily,
Well,
or to the barn?
Well, we had to make paths, but it was difficult for a time. Yeah, it was. I don't remember too much of the blizzard itself, but just some of the pictures that I saw and everything later on. Yeah.
Okay. So, what kind of clothing did you wear? Or
When I was real young, Mom had me in an old, it was an overall, completely covered up, you know, and I think she did that to keep me from getting dirty and stuff or getting in the weeds. But one time, the men were burning the ditch banks, and I got my pants on fire, and so then I did get a scar on my left leg from having my pants get on fire.
and you still have that scar today? or-
It's grown to where
Shut.
you can hardly see
See
it,
it.
but for a long time it was from my knee to my ankle,
Oh.
yeah, on the inside of my leg, yeah.
And they would burn the ditch in the spring for
Yes, to get the weeds down and stuff,
and
yeah.
then for irrigating.
Yeah.
So that. So what did you like to do most when you were young?
Oh, just play with the animals and stuff, you know, the cats and dogs. Had some good friends, but when you lived out on the farm, you weren't able to visit with your friends, so that way you were always glad to get back to school, because then you had your friends in school. And so we rode our bikes. Well, I rode on the back of my brother's bike for when I was younger, and then eventually I did ride the bike or go up and down the railroad tracks, because it went right. The school was located north of the railroad tracks, and the store, the Bracewell store, was on the corner of the roads there, and it was fun. That was my fun place to be, because I loved knee-high cream soda pop. And
Knee-high was N-E.
N-E-I-H-I, I believe, and it was in little bottles, real little, and I think they only had 3 flavors. There was grape and orange and the cream soda, and I liked the cream soda. And it was like a nickel. And Minnie and Dan Herbst were the ones that ran that little store, and it was a little miniature store, and
In
gasoline
Bracewell.
station, gasoline, he pumped gas. But being as I came by so often, I didn't always have a nickel, and so he allowed me to charge it. My account got up to 25 cents, and he called my dad, and my credit was immediately cut off. So I like to tell that story on myself.
On yourself. So, did you have chores that you could earn money for, or was
We
it just,
didn't
No.
get
Money
money
for your
for chores.
chores.
Chores
So-
was just part of the family, part of the family,
responsibility?
yeah.
So you mentioned the Bracewell School, and I mean, I want to make sure people know Bracewell's. If you go east of Windsor,
East of Windsor, if you'd go out like you would be going past the old Kodak plant, where our farm was, what is now there, that rest spot RV and boats. When you get there, the road divides, and where it goes around, that was part of our farm right there on the west side of the farm. And our farm was on both the north and south side of the railroad track. And then the school in the store was to the east at the end of the section. But we didn't have farm clear to the end of the section. It was just halfway up there.
So what far was your farm, would you say, from Bracewell?
Well, just half a section away. I'm not sure how you would say it.
Yeah.
No, because our neighbors were, the Tigases and the Schraders. And on the north side of our farm, we had 3 different families, last name Klaus, and they were all spelled differently. The one Klaus, Henry, and I don't remember her name, but they had 2 boys. And then the family that had Vernie Klaus and Helen Klaus. Helen Klaus graduated with me. But when you asked my name, I did have a nickname from Vernie when he had the filling station, and he still called me then at the same time. But when we were living on the farm, he called me Morning Glory.
Oh,
yeah,
for Gloria. That's a
Morning
wonderful
Glory.
tribute.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful tribute.
And then the other Klaus was on the east side of the road, and they had 2 children, Wilbur and Colleen Klaus. So
when you went to school, when you went to like first grade, they didn't have kindergarten, right?
Right, and I started when I wasn't even 5 yet. Because see, school started in September, and I wasn't 5 until in February. Wow. I was the youngest one in my class, and we had a 3-roomed schoolhouse. And as I'm thinking back on these things, there's a lot of things you forget. I don't remember going to the outhouse, but we had outhouses, and we played the games with the boys because there was never enough to play games, just girls or boys. And my favorite teacher was a Mrs. Hannah. She was an elderly teacher, but I really liked her.
Yeah. So how many, so you had 3 classrooms divided between 1st and 8th grade. So
I think there was probably the 1st and 2nd grade, maybe 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, depending on how many kids, because it was a small community. And then 4th and 5th, and then 6th, 7th, and 8th. It went through the 8th grade. But I didn't stay for the 8th grade because my brother was coming into Windsor. I thought I wanted to come into Windsor. So I did not graduate from Bracewell. A lot of my other classmates did, like Arlene Stromberger and Helen Klaus.
So you went into Windsor Middle School, the building that was burnt down in 65. What was that like when you came into town?
Well, it was a real change and stuff. But I was really glad that growing up on the farm, because there was a lot of experiences. We had a hired man that was a bachelor at the time. And at that time, bringing in the beets to the dump, and I rode with him. He let me ride in the truck with him, and he got out to check the tailgates to make sure the chains were real tight so they wouldn't come loose while we drove down the road. Well, I rolled up his window because it was so cold, and he chewed tobacco. And so we're driving down the road, and you can visualize what happened.
A big spit.
And he was so mad he wouldn't let me ride with him for quite some time. He was really upset with me. But that was one of the experiences. But the other thing, as far as chores in the summertime or near fall, and I had mentioned this and you hadn't ever heard about shock and grain.
Yeah.
Well, see, before they had combines for these wheat fields now, they used to cut the grain you know, clear down to the ground, but they would tie them in bundles, and then we would have to stack those bundles upright, kind of in a like a teepee shape, to keep them from collecting moisture. And then they would come along and pick those up, and then they would put them in another machine to get the wheat off of them.
So that was for wheat? Did you grow any
From
other
wheat.
any
And
other
then
kinds of
beans,
grain?
they
Oh.
would cut pinto beans, and they would be cut, really, they'd kind of cut them, and they would be in a row, and then we would have to go and put them in piles, and we'd have to turn those, and a lot of times there were snakes or mice running around. But the wheat shocking was real hot and itchy. The wheat, it would get inside your sleeves.
And then you wanted a cream soda.
Then I wanted a cream soda. The other thing that people probably don't know is when we raised potatoes,
Okay.
we had to cut those potatoes to get them ready for planting, and you always had to make sure there was at least one eye on each piece of potato. And they would take the potatoes out of the gunny sacks, and there was a piece of, well, I guess you'd call it equipment, but they would dump the potatoes in, and they would slide down, and we would sit in front of a bench with a knife, and underneath that knife was a gunny sack. Well, you would cut your potatoes and then drop them in there. And we would usually do that in the dugout because it was cool during the
So you had a
early-
potato dugout too, if you grew potatoes,
well,
and those are interesting.
When I was first born, we didn't have several of the things that we eventually got, but one of them was this dugout. And that was an interesting thing because Dad had this fellow, they did have to use some wood to have some frames for the door and everything. And this fellow came from Greeley, and he rode a big motorcycle with a sidecar. And the sidecar had all his tools and stuff. And he was a huge, huge man. But it was so funny, at noontime, he would eat his lunch, and then he'd say, I need to lay down for about 20 minutes because I don't want to get fat.
He needed a nap.
So that was another experience with some hired help.
Yeah.
But I don't remember how old I was, but we did have some, at that time they had the prisoner of war camp north
yes.
of town.
We were going to talk about that too.
And we did have prisoners come. They would bring them in on a truck. They would ride in the back of a truck with a guard and a dog. And they were always very polite. And one elderly, well, he was probably one of the older prisoners, was able to speak German to where my dad could understand him. And he found out that most of those prisoners did not want to be in the war.
Yeah.
And they wanted to stay here, but they had to go back.
That was World War II.
But the folks did keep in touch with this man, and he did get back with his family after he got home from the war. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of experiences.
Yeah.
We had getting back to irrigating, we would get the water in several times during the year, but we'd have to use what we called a pump house to pump it into where we could. And I'd have to go and shut the motor off, and I hated that because there was always snakes.
I don't think you like snakes, do you?
I don't like snakes.
Well, let's talk, because we have about 10 minutes left. Let's talk
Okay.
a little bit about, you went to the junior high and Windsor Junior High and then on to high school, or? did
Yeah,
you-
yes, I graduated in '53.
Okay.
But I was trying to think of, I wanted to think back on some other things that, as far as Bracewell.
Yes.
Because we're trying to commemorate Bracewell. we always looked forward to the end of the year because we always had a school picnic, and we'd come into Island Grove Park, and that was a big celebration. My mom would always bring one of those big black, I call them black, roaster pans, and she would cook her pinto beans, from scratch, and she'd make a whole big one of those round things of baked beans, and they were always, none of them came home. They were always, that was her specialty, and they always wanted Rose Miller's baked beans.
Baked beans. Oh.
Yeah. And let's see, what else? I was trying to think of some of the other things. Like I say, the railroad was an important part going in and out of our yard.
Was there many houses in Bracewell? No.
Well, there was Bracewell itself. All there was, as far as Bracewell at that time, was the country store and the school and that beet dump. That was it.
No post office.
No post office, no. But I still remember our address was Greeley.
Okay.
Route 2, Box 247, Greeley. And, yeah. I was trying to remember if there was something else that I wanted to remind you of.
Well, it looks like you probably had your chickens for eggs and then for food.
Yes, and and we did butcher some. We would at times have a time when we would do some butchering, and then we would make sausage. And Mom had a big copper kettle that she would cook the heart and the liver and everything like that. And it was a big thing to. We had a wooden bench, and we would put the sausage stuffer on there, knock it down, and Mom would get at that time they would buy the intestines that came all salted, and we'd have to wash those.
Oh, to stuff into, yes.
That was, and so then we would
casings
and stuff and everything. But early on, we didn't have a bathroom. Oh, that was the other thing.
Yeah, you have that on here too.
That we had to use the outhouse. Plus, because we didn't have a bathroom, early on when I was little, I can still remember Mom heating water on the stove, and we had one huge galvanized tub. And that's the way we all took our baths. I would go first, and then my brother, and then my sister, my mom, and then Dad was the last to have the bath. And that's the way we did it.
Saturday night bath? Or?
Saturday night bath, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. So, with that said, was there anything else you wanted to talk about or tell us about?
Well, I'm trying to remember whether there was anything else.
Well, we've covered a lot. I mean, now, do you want to talk about what your life was like after Bracewell, or just basically your childhood in Bracewell?
Well, I have a lot of fond memories of Bracewell. A lot of there was the Firesteins and Strombergers and Weimeisters and Klauses and stuff. But it is so changed now, It's really something.
Well, we have the Tigges farm there.
And the Tigges farm.
That's a national registered farm that people are welcome to visit. And, and for the 100-year time of that.
Let's see, I'm trying to think. I'll probably think of other things as I try to.
Do you remember when the junior high burnt down in Windsor? That was after you graduated.
After I'm thinking about all these things, you realize that some of your memory isn't so good.
Oh, your memory is wonderful, Gloria. But it's the thing. It's interesting to always look at what's most important that that really comes out to us.
This is kind of cute too, because back then when we went to the school, they still had the desks with the inkwells in it.
Okay.
And I had long curls, and the boy that sat behind me would always try to dunk my hair in the inkwells. But it was a fun time. You know, we played baseball together. In the wintertime, we would play fox and geese. I'm sure what some people don't know what that was.
You run in
run
a circle path in the snow. And
kick the can or whatever. Growing up, there wasn't. You'd go to town, and when you'd come back, there'd be 1 or 2 yard lights when you'd come back to Bracewell. Now it's changed a lot there too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was there a church there, or where did you go to church?
We went to church in Greeley at St. Paul's Congregational Church in Greeley on the east side when they had the church on the east side and stuff.
Okay.
But no, I was glad when we came into Windsor, but
Bracewell took care of what you needed, and your mom and dad grew what you needed to eat. And
yes, yes.
Well, it sounds lovely. Well, with our time, that's very, very interesting to hear about Bracewell, Colorado, from Gloria, Morning Gloria.
Morning Gloria.
Morning Gloria. And thank you for your time.
Oh,
and your
thanks.
interest.
Oh, thank you. Bye.